Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really special segment for you where I'm going to be comparing two really outstanding watches with a lot of meaning to them, whether it be for the channel or for my own personal collection. But before we dive in, quick customary wristwatch check. Today I have on my SLA017 high beat. There, as you can see, really beautiful, and looking forward to sharing the full review with you guys. Have it currently on an Artem sailcloth strap with their Omega style deployment, and it works absolutely fantastic. Now, the two watches today we're going to feature are, one of them being this gorgeous SLA017, which has essentially been a grail watch for me for many, many years. And I recently was able to acquire this thanks to a gift from my wife to commemorate not only my 40th birthday, but also my milestone of reaching 30,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So thanks to everybody out there who are, of course, subscribers. And if you're not already subscribed and set up for notifications, please go ahead and hit that icon as well as that notification bell. But this piece right here has just been something special, and I've wanted it for a long time, and it took a while. I mean, this was released back in 2017. Recording this now, it's 2023. So clearly this isn't some honeymoon type of watch. There's a lot of thought that went into this piece, and acquiring it and kind of adding it to fit a very special place within my collection. But we'll be comparing it to probably the most popular watch ever featured on my channel, which is the SPB143, or if you're in Japan, the JDM nomenclature is SBDC101. And this piece, of course, is just immaculate, and it's just, for all the reasons you love this watch, this one, it's been kind of, the comparison being the recreation versus the reimagining. And what a lot of people don't realize is this isn't the first time that Seiko has done this. They did it actually with this particular watch. The original watch, they actually reissued at one point as a special edition, and then did a reimagining as the Marine Master 300 that we all know today, which continued to evolve. Now, I'm hoping that happens with this same model, being that affordable everyday reimagining that really captures the things that we loved about Seiko's first dive watch and puts it into a more contemporary space, and also, makes it more usable, more wearable, and ultimately more attainable at a lower price point. So very, very cool. And this one, I mean, my singular review for this is probably like my most watched video, apart from, I think, the Blue Diver comparison, which that one, I mean, it had a couple years head start on the review for this bad boy. So I'm really excited to compare and contrast these for you guys, just because they're two great watches, and years and years later, I think there's actually some things that might surprise you that they have in common, and also some things that might surprise you that are actually very, very different about these two pieces. I think at face value, you see them and you figure, oh, there's just the nice one and then there's the not as nice one. But there's actually give and take, I would say. Of course, I'm lucky that I have the ISO update dial, where you don't have that extra kind of offset indice at the 3 o'clock. But other than that, I mean, there's definitely some trade-offs, and this is still a really, really fantastic watch for the money. So that was an extremely long intro. So if you haven't already fast forwarded, let's go ahead, flip the camera around, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, now before I get these in hand, I did want to just cover a few of the basics here when we get into the specifications. Now, this SLA017, of course, is a 2,000 piece limited edition, and it is, you can consider it more of a reissue or a recreation, whereas the SPB143 is really meant to be a reimagining. Now, because of that, there is definitely shared DNA in terms of the watch that inspires both of these models, but there are are some slight differences. We're getting a 39mm case versus a 40.5mm case. Also, we're getting 14.2mm thick versus 13.8. Yes, the SLA is actually thicker, and even when it comes to the lug to lug, they are very similar as well. 47.6 versus 47.5 lug to lug, and the SLA is actually slightly longer. Both of them are made out of stainless steel, brushed and polished, and they both have that DiaShield super hard coating. There's big difference in the price points, $3,400 originally, but now trading in between 4 and 10K versus 1,200 MSRP. Currently, you can get them brand new from Sakura watches for $558. I'm talking about the SPB143. They both have unidirectional rotating bezels, but there's a bit of a difference when you look at the layout, right? So the scale is quite different in terms of the size, the thickness, and one is a glossy lacquer while the other one has a brushed undercoat, and it gives it just a much more modern aesthetic. And I think overall just a more modern layout when you look at how kind of flat everything is versus the depth that you're going to get with the SLA. So there are some differences. They both do have sapphire with what's the word I'm looking for? AR coating, right, on the underside, but one has a single dome and versus a single curve versus dual curve sapphire and more of a box style edge on it on the SLA, so you're going to see a little bit of a difference there as well. And then even when you get down to the 3-link bracelets, yes, they are a similar look, but they actually do have quite a different configuration in terms of the way that they're actually executed. So with that said, let's go ahead, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, so if you couldn't notice already, we're talking 8L movement, which is going to be 4 hertz, right, or 28,800 vibrations per hour, versus the 6R movement here, which is going to be 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour. So slightly smoother on that second hand sweep there, and you can see the dial tones are very similar. I will say that the SPB, it does have a little bit of a cleaner, whiter application of the daytime lume versus here. You can see it has a little bit more of a green tone on the SLA in daylight. So those things are different. Also, something to note is that the lume pip is actually shielded on the SPB, but not on the SLA. That is actually out there and could pick up stain or patina, which isn't great. So, it's not just a straightforward thing there. Even when you look at the handsets, they are slightly different, a little bit more simple, as you can see on the SPB, where it just has one half is brushed, one half is polished, versus here you're getting a full beveled edge there. Also, you're getting the more traditional style where the pencil hands are essentially the same width, just different lengths. Here you're getting that kind of wider hour, a wider hour hand there, but the second hands are actually a little bit similar. I should say quite similar. But I will say, I believe to my eye, the SPB has more of a flat cut versus the seconds hand. Well, maybe they are. So I don't know. I feel like it has a bit more of a rounded edge to it, at least by comparison to that handset there. So also you can see the way that the lume is applied. This is the modern way most Seiko lume is applied. So what they do is they have a pad and then they kind of glob the lume on top of the indice, versus here they're slightly recessed within the index and then filled. So it's going to give you a bit of a different a different experience. Also, you can see that high polished rehot playing with the light there, versus here it's going to be a brushed satin rehot, which isn't going to play with the light quite as much. So little differences. Also, let's check this out. Harsh angle. you can see that it's a single dome, meaning that the curve is only on the outer portion of the crystal and not the underside. Whereas here, we get at a harsh angle, and you're going to see still very, very legible, except for at the extreme edges of that box dome sapphire. Also, very, you know, I'd say minimalist case back, you know, paying tribute to the original 62 MAS there. It's pretty much just, you know, acid burnt, and I wouldn't even call that etched, right? Or maybe you could say it's lasered. But here you're going to have, of course, the famous Hokusai wave, plus the, you know, the etching with all the information there. Also, you're going to see, check this out, you're getting chamfers. You're getting an upper and a lower chamfer there, versus you're going to be getting a slab side, although it is a thinner slab side, because, let me give it a quick wipe here, a thinner slab side, because it does have this beautiful undercut, which is very, very nice. But ultimately, it's just that, you know, it is a bit simpler finished. When we get to the bezel action, this is going to be a lot easier to turn. Ooh. Very smooth. Still having those clicks. Ooh, fast or slow, this one, very impressive. But I will say, because it is easier to turn, let's say you're wiping off, you know, you have your little microfiber cloth and you're wiping this, you might accidentally knock it, right? And you might actually offset that. So that is something that, hey, first world problems, but something to consider. And honestly, oh, went a little bit too far there. But you won't have that issue with this 120 click bezel, because this one is going to be a lot stiffer. And, ooh, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like hard to move, because it does have great grip on this coin edge. But it's definitely going to be a lot more stable. So some people might prefer that. This is honestly like one of the better bezels that are out there for really any Seiko, because of, one, the grip, and then two, the action. It just feels very, very tight and dialed in, versus here it definitely feels dialed in, but definitely more on the smoother side. And you guys can also see just, you know, the finishes here, very glossy, very satiny and matte. You can see so much more light play, versus something that's going to be a little bit more toolish. And this just feels very, very modern. I mean, you look at this and you think this is probably more akin to something like a Pelagos in terms of its layout, being a little bit more angular, a little bit flatter, and then this definitely just gives you those vintage vibes with the level of depth and the level of play that are happening between the crystal, between that high polished rehaut, between you know, these, you know, very tall indices there. So there's definitely a lot to love. Now, getting to the back side here, guys. Oh, well, let's just see the end links. Similar style, right? And some people feel like these end links don't really suit the case. Well, I mean, that's the whole point of having these boxed lugs, is really you can put anything in there, right? And this is just what they kind of did. But I will say, if you look at the profile of these three links, you can see much thicker versus much thinner. So check that out. So this almost has like a president-like roundness to it, where here you're getting much slimmer. And then also, when you look at that trigger there, that button, it is very much milled, versus here, although it is a thick piece, I believe that is just like a stamped trigger there that they use. So, I mean, not that I saw this and thought I wish it was thicker, but you do get that here. So it's not the exact same clasp. Even the way that they open,
is going to be slightly different. You can see here when this one opens, it lines up and it almost is just above this opening here is where it hits. So if you do get any essentially metal on metal contact, it's going to be very low and close to that seam. Here though, when this opens, it's going to be more flush towards the center of where it hits. So when you get that metal on metal contact, once you start wearing away that dia shield, you're going to see a little bit of line. You might even see some of it here. So that is slightly different, although the execution on this diver's extension is pretty much the same. Let me just pop this out here if I can. Here we go. So still the milled, style setup that you would expect. But, everything else very similar there, but it is different. Again, it's not like you're just getting the same watch. I know a lot of people have kind of sold this as, oh, it's the same thing for less money. There are definitely differences all the way up and down both of these pieces. But man, this has already been quite a long comparison. So let's go ahead and get these on the wrist. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this thing just wears beautifully. Of course, if I was to take my wrist and get it a little bit too close to the camera here, you're going to get a bit of lens distortion. So it's going to appear a bit larger. And that's just, again, it happens. But what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist a little bit lower and just tighten up the frame here so you guys can get still a detailed look while having a bit of a truer aspect ratio. And you can see this definitely has more of that vintage layout there. In terms of the dial, in terms of the depth, in terms of the just overall proportions that you're going to see versus here, although yes, that looks great as well, it's definitely flatter. It just feels like it has less dimension, but at the same time, although I would say the dial and the bezel have a certain level of flatness, you can see there's definitely more curves along the links here, and then as well as getting some really nice, again, those touches with the chamfers. It's weird because it has a bit of flatness, but then also a lot of rounded features, which for me just definitely gives it more of a sporty look. Of course, there are those little fine details and those little glints of polish there that do help it feel, I'd say rather premium and expensive feeling. I mean, a lot of people are comparing this watch to watches like, your Tudor Black Bay 58, and not necessarily these because one, they're not as abundant. But I mean, I think specs wise, this would probably be a much closer comparable, which I did actually compare this one to the Seamaster 1957 trilogy reissue, which was a really fun video. So if you haven't seen that, definitely check the channel history for that. But I'd say this is probably more comparable to something like a Tudor. And, if these were more readily available, I think they would really, they would give Tudor a run for their money within the space. Yes, the bracelet, the clasp, they're not really with, up to that more luxury level execution. These are definitely meant to be more functional and tool-like. But I will say, of course, the watch case. So if you're going to put this on a strap, which some people, actually plenty of people wear Black Bays on different types of straps, whether it be single pass or, a two-piece strap. I think that's where it gets a lot more interesting and competitive. Of course, this is going to be, fully in-house to the highest levels, versus, there's a lot of stuff that are going to be on Tudor that's going to be in group. So not quite the same level there. I mean, it's hard for anybody to really match Seiko's level, considering they grow their crystals and rubies. They make their own lubricants. So this is in-house to basically the highest level that's out there in terms of mass production with scale, of course. So you guys can see they definitely do have a different wear profile, but they still do have a very similar aesthetic, and I do enjoy the way both of these look, and I think they both look fantastic. Let me know which one you guys think suits my 7.5-inch wrist better. But with that said, let's actually get these off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, I will say, at least for me, although I'm fairly sure these are the exact same formulas of Lumabrite, there's definitely more in terms of the thickness of application, I would say, on the SLA. But let me know what you guys think as you are looking at this. On the big screen, I'm just looking at it with my naked eyes as well as through the little flip out screen here. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, right? Or spend some time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to even include some harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of production defects. But what you're just going to see here is, you're going to see some wear from me wearing these pieces. In terms of maybe some of the glossiness of the high polish, it's going to be maybe a little cloudy from some of the fingerprints. But other than that, not too much to complain about when you get into the harsh lighting. But as you see the way that the light glides over these, there is a bit of a different tone there. You guys can see some warmer tones, some bronze tones that are in there. But I will say that it looks like the SPB is a little bit more high contrast with the way that its sunray finish. Oh no, actually, maybe just depends on where the light source is, huh? Those are very, very close. Very close. But you can see that there's definitely a lot more light play on that SLA in terms of how dynamic all of the kind of extra surface area of polish, the way that it's holding the light and playing with it, definitely has a bit more charm and life. Well, there's definitely nothing wrong with the SPB. It's a great watch. I mean, it's honestly one of the best watches for under under $1,000 or right around $1,000, depending on if you want to pay full retail or you want to take advantage of the yen rate exchange or not, right? These are both outstanding pieces. I do wish that the SLA was more widely available. And that's, as an enthusiast, obviously it's nice to have something that's collectible as a collector, as an individual. But I feel like this watch is just so good. One of the things that I really enjoy, of course, is hearing how many people love the SPB. And it would be nice to also have folks get their hands on these SLA models, although they are highly limited and definitely more expensive than a lot of people, may be willing to spend for something like this. But you start thinking about, a reissue of an iconic brand's first dive watch. Those aren't cheap at all. So when, regardless of the history, those types of things, I mean, imagine Rolex hasn't even done that. They basically had Tudor do a reimagining. They didn't do anything close to a reissue or a recreation. But if they did, it would be a very expensive timepiece, right? So I really love both of them, and they're both at the end of the day 200-meter divers, ISO compliant, with bracelets. They drilled lugs. They have everything that you need, right? Well, one thing, and there's some things that people like, okay, there's a signed crown on the SLA, and it's the cool one where it says Seiko all the way spelled out, which is a very nice touch. But this modern SPB, in many ways, like the modern Marine Master has evolved. Who knows? Maybe they'll continue to do more, more versions and iterations and generations of this particular SPB line, and we can really see this thing, get some legs. And they've already done an 8L variation of this. There's like 4 of them. I reviewed those recently. It was at 4, maybe 3. Where there's like a gold dial, blue dial, blacked out. version. But basically, it's kind of combining these two watches, and the price point is somewhere in the middle. And although I believe they are limited, they're not anywhere near as limited as or probably as desirable, because they're a little bit more meant to be polarizing versus being kind of an everyday piece. But they already are really working on evolving and growing out this very, very popular line, and I think for very good reasons. So yeah, it's 2023 when I'm doing this. This is way later than when these watches were first released, but hey, it took some time for me to get them together. I'm happy to share them with you. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.